welcome to the podcast, Hannah. It's lovely to have you here, joining us from your yurt, which is really, it looks beautiful. I'm envious. I'm sitting here in my little office. Let's just get straight into this. I would love for you to share with us about your first pregnancy experience and what your vision was like for your first birth.
Cool. Thank you, Carla. It's so good to be here because these journeys are so dear to my heart. So it's such a joy and an honor to be able to share them. So my first pregnancy was my daughter Nora, who's now 3. So she was conceived back in June 2020. And at that time we were living in the Coromandel, and we were just living in our camper van on someone's land. And we really had dreams of finding a piece of land and putting down roots and creating community for ourselves to raise our children. So as soon as I got pregnant, we sort of started to make those moves, and and so we found ourselves in maybe about 7 months through the pregnancy moving up to the far north, and with the hopes to find some land to move on to buy. And so I had this dream. I always kind of knew that I really wanted to home birth. And I just kind of had this expectation that I would. And my mum had 3 vaginal births, and I always felt very in tune with my body, and I just kind of assumed that I would have a beautiful, natural vaginal home birth. So 7 months through the pregnancy, we moved up north, and we were looking for a midwife to come and support us to do a home birth where we were living, which was in a caravan in a very rural, remote piece of land. And no midwife was willing to support us with that. So that was sort of like the first sort of big stumbling block, I guess, that we came up against. But we were able to piece together a bit of a plan, and we were able to find a midwife who was willing to support us at someone else's house. So we kind of put together this plan with this kind of one willing midwife to meet once I went into labour at somebody else's house who wasn't going to be present for at the time of birth.
Can I just ask, Hannah, what distance were you from, like, drive time to the nearest hospital?
So we were maybe about I'd say at least 45 minutes to an hour from Aotearoa Hospital.
Okay.
They don't have,
which isn't a tertiary hospital, so it would have had to have been down to Whangārei for a tertiary hospital. Which, were you in between Whangārei and Aotearoa, or were you north of Aotearoa?
Between, I would say.
Yeah.
Kind of like in the wops.
Yeah. So, and I, knowing what I do about the midwifery shortage in New Zealand, given you were 7 months pregnant, you were remote rural, there was probably a really limited pool of midwives in the area, full stop, and who were available, in 2 months' time. But add to that, on top of that, this also the distance factor and you wanting to birth at home would be another layer. So you found a midwife who was willing to support you, which is quite different to the sort of scenario I'm thinking of when I was pregnant with my babies, where I could, I mean, I knew the midwives because I was a midwife myself at the time. So I knew who I wanted to have at my birth, but I could have interviewed a number of midwives and kind of decided who felt the best, fit for me and had a philosophy that really aligned with my own and that sort of thing. So I'm interested to know if the midwife who you did find felt like a good fit for you, or was it just like a oh, she'll have to do kind of scenario?
Yeah, a little bit the latter. It
Yeah.
was not somebody who I felt very resonant with, and there were lots of sort of things and comments that she made that, yeah, just really felt like red flags and didn't align with my the way that I really wanted to view birth and pregnancy and the wisdom of babies and that sort of thing. But I sort of had this feeling that it wouldn't matter. It kind of was a bit, yeah, I just really assumed that the birth was going to happen naturally and at home. And I was not really aware of how big of an influence it was of who was going to be in my space. And I guess also just hopeful that it wouldn't be a problem. And I think I also had this sort of expectation that all women that work as midwives would hold space for women in birth in this kind of way that I had fantasized.
Yeah,
And
right.
yeah.
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know when you're pregnant with the first, right? Like, you're making me think back to when I was a teenager and I was so lit up around birth, and my vision of what birth was had been garnered from the beautiful hippie home birth books that my mum had acquired in the 70s when she was pregnant with me and wanting to birth me at home. So like, and the images in those books were all kind of very like it was a family affair at home, and it looked like full on, but it looked amazing and beautiful. Uh, and when I became a student midwife after I finished school, I was so shocked at what the reality of birth was for most birthing people. I was having to go into the hospital system. So just that kind of naivety around, we have this image of what we view birth to be and this expectation of, naturally you would assume if you hadn't been conditioned otherwise that, yeah, of course I know how to give birth. I'm a woman. Like, I've been doing this for an eternity. And so yeah, I can appreciate why you would be like, well, hopefully everything goes, it's going to go fine anyway, and so it's not that big of a deal who this midwife is, who's going to be attending me. Yeah, right. I'll let you get on with your story.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess so. I'm just checking in about where I'm at in my story. So we had yeah, we would just have our little visits each week or however often they were, and it just felt very exciting. The visits themselves were a little bit like underwhelming, I guess, but I was very excited and very positive and optimistic about birthing. And yeah, I'm just wondering if there's anything else to add in particular about the pregnancy or to flow into this.
What was your man's kind of image of birth? Was he just getting on board with you? Was he of a similar mindset, like, wait for
Mm.
this, it's all going to go fine?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like he's very supportive of just what I want to do and what I um, choose, and just kind of right there next to me. Mm, yeah.
Awesome.
Shall I continue into the birth story?
Yeah, that would be great.
So yeah, so the plan, I guess, was that when I would go into labor, that we would go to this alternative house, somebody else's house who wasn't going to be there. They were away on holiday. And so it was about 10 o'clock at night. I went out under the stars to pee, and the water just kept coming, and my waters were starting to release. And yeah, it was such a joyful moment. It was just like this real excitement of like, oh my gosh, it's happening. And so I told my partner. I think we had already kind of had a bit of a hint that it might be coming because my mucus plug had released maybe earlier in the day. And I told my partner, and then he very sweetly got into his very practical mode and got he got out the surfboard bag as a water protection for the bed. And I just knelt on the bed over the surfboard. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
And he got busy packing up the car, and then I just straight away started feeling all the hormones working in my body, and just felt very blissful and very sort of euphoric, and felt this really pleasurable sensations. And it was amazing. Like, it felt very otherworldly, like just drifting into this other world. And we got in the car and started driving to the house that we had arranged to birth in. And yeah, just it was dark, and just driving down this bumpy country road, it was just such a surreal moment. um, and then so it just so happened that the day that I went into labor was the one night that this family was coming back to this house. So they were all present, and it was, yeah, not how I had expected, because we were expecting an empty house. We knew that day that they were going to be there, so I was sort of trying to tell my body to hold off, but that was the day that I went into labor. And so we're driving there. My partner was timing my contractions, and I just didn't really want to speak. I was just really enjoying all the sensations, but he really wanted to know the timing. So I was trying to give him little hints that, yeah, nice contractions coming. And then he was like, oh gosh, they're 5 minutes apart. So he called the midwife and invited her to come and meet us at the house. And when we got to the house, the woman, she was a friend of mine, she greeted us at the door, and it felt like a very warm greeting. Like, it was very nice to see her there. And yeah, and so we went to the room that we had set up as the birthing room. And then the midwife arrived at some point, and I think just already from this moment, things started to shift for me. So going into somebody else's house and feeling kind of confined to this one room, because they were in the other rooms and their children were asleep in their bedrooms. So yeah, I already was sort of feeling a bit kind of trapped perhaps, and not able to just follow my flow. Yeah, and then the midwife arrived, and she came in, and I just remember feeling a bit of feeling kind of like ashamed, I think, was kind of the feeling. And like I don't know, there was like stories coming up for me around like calling her out of her bed at midnight, and then when she came, everything had really slowed down. And so I sort of felt like I was faking it, or like being perceived to be faking it, or that my request of her coming was not valid. So there was already these kind of stories starting to come in. And when she entered, she just greeted my dog who was there, and sort of really gave him a lot of attention. And it felt quite confusing for me why she was going straight to my dog, and then didn't really greet me, just kind of started to talk to my partner about what had been happening, that sort of thing. Yeah, and then because things had really slowed down in terms of contractions, she she sort of like checked in with me like, oh hey, how's it going? And yeah, and then yeah, there was not a lot of connection there, I guess, was the feeling. And then she just said, I think you should just get some rest and I'll come back in the morning. And I think, like, reflecting back, the feeling that I really wished, what I was really longing for in that moment was for um, like a wise woman to come and like meet me at this gateway into birth and just see me, and to just like wish me well, kind of, and just to, if I was not feeling in my power, to just hand me back all power that I was feeling tempted to like give away to anybody else, and to just remind me that I can do it, and remind me to follow what I felt like I was needing in that moment. And what I felt like I received was, just not really being seen, and then being told what to do, like being told to just go and lie down and rest. And I really didn't want to lie down and rest. Like, I felt like all this kind of aliveness and excitement and wanting to find my flow. And then I guess a sense of abandonment as well, because she left and said she was going to come back in the morning. So then I had the whole night of just lying in this bed with, aware of other people in other rooms, and kind of just trying to shut down everything in my body and rest and do what I was told, and waiting for that sense of safety to hopefully arrive in the morning, to give myself space to start to enter birth in the way that I had imagined. Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's actually quite heartbreaking to hear you share this beginning of your birth experience to be like quite ecstatic sounding. You said you could feel all these hormones doing their thing, and you didn't talk about pain, you didn't talk about fear, you didn't talk about anxiousness about whether this was supposed to be happening like this or not. You were in full trust and surrender, and your body was meeting you in that, giving you what it's designed to give you, to help your labor to progress and to help you to rise above the growing intensity. You've given these beautiful transcendent sort of hormones, and that's how it would have continued if you were able to stay in your safe space, if you and so having to leave there and go somewhere that didn't have the same sense of safety, and not enabling you to just go with your body and make the sounds and movements and all the things that you were doing back at home, meant that you're sending a message to your body like, I'm not feeling so safe now. And then the midwife comes and she adds to that lack of sense of safety and well-being. And you put it beautifully, you just didn't feel seen, which is something I hear a lot of in my role in birth trauma support, as a sense of just not being seen or heard in your experience. So your body was doing what it's designed to do when it feels unsafe, and that is, don't want to birth a helpless little infant. If the environment is perceived as being threatening in any way. So that sense of lack of safety in your body was then met with a turning down of the hormones that cause your labour to progress well. And this is a really normal, common, helpful, really, response to birth. And what it needs to be met with is recognition from your team. Maybe she's not feeling safe. Maybe she's needing something that she hasn't currently got, and gently working out what that is with you, and then the hormones will switch back on when you're feeling that renewed sense of safety, when you're feeling seen, when you're feeling supported, and you go on and birth your baby. But I'm sorry that was your experience.
Thank you.
So did you manage to stay put in bed and quote unquote rest until daybreak? What kind of happened from there on out?
Yeah, that night is a bit like vague in my memory. But yeah, more or less it was sort of like this kind of wishing for it to start happening, because it felt like my non-physical body was really open to it. I guess not, but like there was like parts of me that was really there and willing, and then there was just this part that was like, oh, you've been told to wait, kind of. Like, I think just the fact that she said I'll come back in the morning just gave me the feeling that it was not convenient should I progress during the nighttime more. So it was like, yeah, I have to rest until morning was sort of the feeling I had. So yeah, I think I did manage to pretty well shut down my labor until morning, and then the sun started to come up, and that was quite a strange feeling. And then I think my partner suggested that we go for a walk down to the beach, because the house we were at was by the beach. So we walked down to the beach, and I remember like coming back up, I could barely walk a few steps between having contractions, and they were getting pretty intense. And then that was around the same time that the midwife arrived again. And it must have been, I think, around 11 a.m. or something that she arrived. So we went straight back into our little room, and we had a birth pool set up. And so somebody suggested it's a good time to get in the pool. Somebody suggested it's a good time to take my clothes off. It was all this kind of like external input of what to do, which was kind of like, at that point, I was just sort of like, well, yeah, I don't know. I really didn't feel like I was leading the show or kind of in any capacity or self-connection to do that. So I was welcoming any suggestions. And then it just felt quite disembodied, like I was just in the pool going through these sensations. The midwife is just sitting on the single bed, and it was, a relatively small room, so she was right there and just kind of watching, I guess. And then a second midwife arrived, and they just started chatting like about their weekend or something, and it was a very small room. And I mean, I think I just snapped at them at some point and said, would you mind not talking right now? Like, it's really distracting, or I'm not enjoying that. And it was kind of like, the sense of bewilderment, I guess, that was sort of just so not what I expected to receive as a woman birthing. Like, I really wished for this sense of reverence and sacredness and respect, I guess, in that space. And then at some point, I think I said, "Oh, I feel like I need to poop." And then the midwife said, "Oh, no, you probably need to push." And then so I was like, "Oh, okay, like, I don't think I do, but let's give it a go." And I kind of gently tried, nothing was really happening. And then the midwife started to talk about this time of 18 hours since my waters had released. And and she started saying like, "Oh, if the baby doesn't come in an hour, then we're going to have to go to hospital." And um yeah, and basically an hour rolled around and the baby wasn't there. It didn't feel anywhere close for me. I didn't feel in it really. It was kind of just felt like going through the motions. And then she really wanted to do a cervical check, which we had said in our prenatals that we were keen to we weren't keen to have cervical checks. Yeah, we would like it to be as uninterrupted as possible, was like our wishes. But she really wanted to do a check, and I didn't really feel like I had the ability to say no in that moment. And she asked me to lie down, and again, my body really didn't want to lie down, but I was just kind of following this authority that I had invited in. And so I laid down, and somehow, and as soon as her hand or her fingers went inside and touched my cervix, I didn't feel it. I didn't remember feeling her hand, but my whole body just went into this state of agony and contraction. And I guess, started screaming because it was just, yeah, like a pain that I had never felt before. And then she just started yelling. Well, my memory is that it was sort of like a very like shift in the energy, and she started getting quite panicked and ushered me out the door and said, "We've got to go to hospital right now." Um,
Did she
and
explain why?
no, it was just like 18 hours has been up, and I could, yeah, she was uncomfortable, I think, with continuing the home birth. And um, I think just that shift in energy was a bit of a like, okay, 18 hours is up. You're now in this state of complete agony. It's time to go to the hospital.
Mm.
And then, um, so I went in the back seat and my partner drove me to Aotearoa Hospital. And I was in complete agony the whole way. Like, I just wanted to die. It was so sore. um, and like looking back, I know that the fear that was in my mind in that moment was like, something just happened to my body and now I'm being ushered to hospital. Something's really, really wrong. I didn't realize that my body had just been touched, and my body reacted to that touch, um, and that this fear in my mind is, like making my body contract and feeling really painful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really believed that something was really wrong in that moment, and I think that kept me in this contracted state for pretty much the rest of the time.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
that's so awful. You're so right. When we feel, the more fear we feel, the more pain we experience. When we're in a state of fear, we are more contracted, we're more tense in our bodies, and that additional tension causes us to experience more pain. And as we feel more pain, that makes us more fearful. So there's this sort of snowballing effect that takes place. But as well, when we're experiencing fear, our body primes us puts us into fight or flight mode, right? Primes us to survive the perceived threat, danger, and so it sort of shuts off our access to those helpful hormones, the ones that help us to transcend the pain of labor and that cause us to feel loved up and in touch with our bodies, and instead go into a more dissociated state, and we're just like fighting instead of surrendering. We're like, yeah. So yeah, fear has very, very real impacts on our experience of pain in labour, our progress in labour. Yeah. So, and your man's driving you up to the hospital, and that drive is about a little over an hour, or it's...
So from the house that we were at, it was about maybe 35, 40 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And bumpy and just horrible.
Oh yeah, yeah. And did your midwife, did she arrive there before you, or was she there to greet you when you arrived there?
No, she was, I don't know. No, she wasn't. She was following us, but I don't think she got there before us. And so when we got there, the staff knew that we were coming, and they were trying to find a wheelchair. They didn't want me to walk, but I was in this, in agony anyway. But they couldn't find the wheelchair, so they were just kind of holding us at the door, trying to get us to wait. And I was just like in so much pain. I was just like, oh, I just want to walk to wherever I have to go to get this pain medication, because that was in my mind as the only thing that was going to save me, that or just dying. And yeah, eventually I think a wheelchair came, or I walked to the room, and then they gave me the nitrous oxide gas, and that sent me into like a psychotic episode, which I was really not expecting it to be, like, mind altering. And yeah, that was also very tense and intense, and I was still feeling the pain. And then they were trying to give me morphine, but they couldn't find, or they couldn't get it in the vein, or so that was creating a lot of pain as well. And I kind of, I remember either I was like very kind of like sedated from the drugs, or I was strapped to the table. I don't quite remember, but I just remember like looking into my partner's eyes and just absolutely bawling my eyes and just asking him, can I trust these people? Because what was coming up for me was this, really not trusting these people, and just, feeling very, very unsafe. Yeah.
Not frightening.
And then they organised a helicopter to take us to Whangārei Hospital. There was no conversation about continuing labour in Kaitaia. And so then after a while, the helicopter came, and I think, I didn't even see my home birth midwife at all during any of this, apart from like behind the doors outside the room in Kaitaia, just handing over to somebody else. But there was no personal handover, or no letting me know what was going to happen or what the plan was. I just got handed over. And then my partner, he wasn't able to come in the helicopter, and it's about a 3-hour drive down to Whangārei. So he had to leave me and go drive to Whangārei, so that he would be there not too much longer after when we arrived in Whangārei. Yeah.
Oh, far out. I can't begin to imagine how scary that flight must have been for you, and how, hideous that drive must have been for him.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I had this new midwife who I didn't know with me in the helicopter, and I had a very unpleasant, like in the Kaitaia hospital, I was having a very unpleasant vibe from her. And then But she was the one that was with me in the helicopter, and I kind of had to hold her hand because I had nobody else in that moment. And again, I'm just strapped to this, what are they, the bed. We are just strapped in this helicopter, and it was just, again, like the pain medications did nothing. It was just the most intense pain that I was going through. And then we got to Whangārei, and this midwife handed me over to the midwives at Whangārei Hospital. And so I'm in the same room, and she said to the midwife that she was handing me over to, like, oh yeah, this girl, she wanted to have a home birth, but she's not going to get any of it now. Kind of like it seemed like she was making fun of the fact that I thought that I could have a natural home birth, and kind of just laughing, and it was just horrible.
Yeah.
And then so then I'm with this quite lovely midwife, but I'm just like on this bed, and she's tapping away at her computers, and all these straps and things being attached to me, and God knows what. And then at some point she checks me, and she goes, oh, you're 10 centimeters dilated, you can push this baby out. And I was kind of at that point completely given up hope of a natural birth, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know if I wanted to. I was so out of my power and out of my body. And but that, and I think I expressed that to her, and she said, why not? And once I voiced that, it gave me this connection, I guess, back to my own inner process and my own inner feelings, and I started to feel this sense of hope. And then my partner arrived, and and then so we started coached pushing for like 2 or 3 hours of just going purple in the face and trying all the positions, and like I'd never given anything as much effort in my life. And the babies, they could see the baby's head, they could we could touch it and everything, but she wasn't in a position to come through. And so then the doctor comes in and had one look, and I don't know what you look at, and just said, no, it's cesarean. And then that was it. That was his choice. I didn't have any choice other than then they come in with all the signs, the papers to sign, and I guess I had to give my consent, so that was my choice. But it was just like bang, 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 so fast. Like all of a sudden I was on this conveyor belt into the operating theatre, and I had the epidural, I guess, that for the surgery. And then and my partner was able to come in with me, and I just held his hand and looked into his eyes the whole time and smiled as it happened. Just, I guess, just deeply, like just completely dissociating from the deep pain that I was feeling and the grief. And and just
seemed like such a wasted opportunity when there was that glimmer of hope, when that midwife asked you, well, why not? Why do you not want to birth your baby, push your baby out? And you said it was in reflecting on that question that you were sort of brought back into your body or connected with your experience again. And then I was hoping that the next piece of your story might be, the midwife, rather than coached pushing, she was like, how can we support you to feel more hopeful? How can we support you to feel more safe, to get back into your body even more? There's just such a lack of recognition for the powerful links between what's happening in our minds and what's happening in our bodies in birth. And whilst in the medical system, you can appreciate that that might be how they function and, you know, how they've come through their learnings, you would hope that this midwifery wisdom, the wise woman tradition of midwifery, that would have been passed down, and that any midwife who's wanting to work with birthing women knows, you know, our role is to protect normal birthing, physiological birthing as midwives, right? And like 101 of that is appreciating that link between mind and body, and understanding that in order for a woman's body to do what it's designed to do in birth, around releasing those helpful hormones and opening the body up and birthing the baby, requires a sense of safety, emotional, physical, mental, spiritual safety, physical safety. And if more midwives understood that, it's not hard. It doesn't take a lot to shift a woman from feeling terrified and dissociated to feeling seen and supported and safe. It actually doesn't take much, oftentimes. And that was that opportunity, and instead you were coached to push when you were clearly not ready to push. I hear so many stories of people being told when and how to push, and invariably they end up with babies coming down in poor positions or getting distressed, or the mum running out of energy and, you know, not being able to do it any longer because she's exhausted. Instead of like saying a woman is 10 centimeters dilated and so it's time for her to start pushing her baby out, we need to do away with this, like, you know, 10 centimeters dilated equals ready to push. Like it's oftentimes there is this period after a woman has gone through that sort of transition, or that final stage of her body opening up, where she will have this sort of rest period where her contractions will actually die off a bit, where she might sleep in between contractions. And we don't necessarily know what's happening in terms of the physical things in her and her baby's body in that moment, but we can guarantee that it's going to be wiser than any suggestions that are coming from outside of your body, because your body knows how to safely birth your baby, right? So maybe it's just that you needed a bit more time to come back into your body, to gather your energy, to rest, and to feel safe, or maybe your girl needed just a bit more time to shift into a slightly different position, a slightly more flexed head, so that she could negotiate her way through the pelvis in a more easily. Who knows? But like, why are we hell bent on interfering and rushing? And why is there so little respect for that clear link between whether a woman's feeling safe and her ability to birth her baby? We've lost so much of this wisdom.
Wow. It's actually really powerful to reflect back on that one moment, because I often feel like there was this fork in the road, you know, like way back, and to think of that body wisdom being there with me right through, you know, every moment of that birth, and that at any moment that was there to tap into. It feels quite nice for me for some reason to to remember and to think about. And I could kind of maybe sense, the hopefulness of these midwives that were supporting me, that they might be able to help me to have this birth vaginally. And then I guess there was these hospital protocols of once certain things had happened, that they had 1 hour to get the baby out. And also these I don't know, I know that they gave me Pitocin, and I don't recall being even asked or having to give consent for that. At some point they just told me that they had just turned it up, and I was kind of like, because I knew about Pitocin and knew that wasn't something that I wanted, and I was kind of surprised that they that was going into my body, and also not surprised because of the intensity of the contractions that I was feeling. But
Wow.
Mind blowing.
Well, it is. I mean, that's blatant disregard for your right to give or refuse consent for a dangerous drug to be given to you intravenously. Sure, Pitocin or syntocinon, we usually refer to it in New Zealand, or sometimes just synthetic oxytocin. It's chemically the same as the oxytocin we make in our brains that gets, our uterus contracting, as well as helps us to feel all good and loved up and bond with our baby and that sort of thing. It's chemically the same substance, but when it's given intravenously, it's given at a much higher dose, and it's given continuously instead of in waves. And really crucially important, it can't cross the blood-brain barrier to impact our brains in the way that our endogenous or naturally produced oxytocin does. So that when our brain is receiving this oxytocin, that triggers the release of other helpful hormones, our endorphins and a prolactin, and it helps us to feel more connected with the people in our birth space, and more ready to meet our baby and to bond and connect, and all the things like it. It doesn't just cause our uterus to contract. So this syntocinon that you were given without any consent process, I mean, you should have had all of the dangers and, the pros and cons, the risks, talked through with you and made sure, are there any questions, whatever, before you are then asked, do you consent? And likewise with the Cesarean, I mean, you said they brought all the forms in to get you to sign. Just because you've signed some forms doesn't mean you've given your informed consent. And was anyone at risk? Was your baby in danger at that point? Were you in danger at that point? And if not, what was the reason for saying you need a Cesarean now? And I'm just pointing out again that it's another example of lack of informed consent being enabled. So a violation of your rights, and it's not uncommon. And it's like you said earlier, these midwives might have felt quite hopeful that they were going to be able to support you to birth your baby naturally and avoid a Cesarean, but they are under a system where there are pressures and threats, really, I feel, to your job, to how you will be received in that environment. There's all these power structures at play within that system, and I think it's hard for a lot of midwives who know how to support physiology to really fight for that to be respected and within that setting, especially if they don't know you, especially if they haven't been by your side throughout your pregnancy or labour journey. Yeah. far out. I wonder if before, when you said, sort of almost seemed surprised with it actually felt nice to hear that your body wisdom was always there for you to potentially tap into at any stage, like your body was serving you. And I wonder if that's because you may have been left with any sort of a story that you had, your body had failed you in birth, or that you had failed in birth, which is often a narrative that women are left with after their birth goes like yours went. You know, you had this image of how you wanted to give birth and how you believed you would give birth and how you believed your body was designed to birth, and then it went nothing like that. And the story that's often left on the hearts of women who've been through that is, I failed at birth. I failed to progress. I couldn't push my baby out. I had to have the doctors or the experts rescue my baby from my faulty body. And so maybe just if there was any of that story there for you, that was just a reminder that actually your body wasn't letting you down at all. Your body was trying to protect you and your baby every step of the way, because you never were supported to feel safe at a time when you absolutely needed and deserved to be treated with the utmost of love, respect, care, reverence, and to feel absolutely safe to let your body do what it needed to do to birth your baby.
Yeah. I think the story for me was not so much around my body failing me, and I've been quite sort of protective of that as well, because against that story, like my intuitive sense was always that if I had felt safe enough, that it all would have gone well. I didn't feel like it was my body. It always felt like the environment and the support. I think what you kind of opened up for me that felt nice was this idea that that even being so far down this road of feeling disempowered and disembodied, that there's still this potential there to reconnect, and this potential there for the for support, like the right support to help a woman to reconnect with her body. And that there's just like these, it felt like, the way I've always looked at it is kind of like that I just stepped down this road of disempowerment, and that was like a one-way street. And I guess it just, it was kind of a new perspective to see that there was all these kind of like side roads that could have been taken as well.
Yeah. I love that you always knew that it wasn't your body failing you, that you were failed by a system of care that doesn't know how to protect and support birthing women. There'll be a lot of listeners and a lot of people who don't have that understanding when they come out the other side of their birth experience. And so though you couldn't relate to what I was saying so much for your personal story, hopefully some people who are listening to this will have some validation around that, it's not our bodies that are failing us. It's our bodies trying to protect us, trying to serve us, keep us alive when we are in a situation that feels, rightly or wrongly, like our lives are in danger. That's what trauma is telling our primal brains.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could feel those stories around me. Like I could feel because my baby, her head was right back when she was born, I knew that depending who I would talk to, people would either, a lot of people would say to me, oh, see, that's clear evidence that she was not ever going to be born naturally. But there was this sort of deeper intuitive knowing in me that if my body felt safe, and if she had the time and she felt safe and was unmedicated, that she would have found her way.
Yes.
So yeah, I could feel those stories of my body being a failure, or my baby not knowing how to birth. I could feel that around me, and I was very protective against not wanting to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
And the piece of shame that did come up for me was around the not knowing of how to protect myself going into the birthing space, and not so much that my body failed me, but that kind of I failed myself more on a on a non-physical level, like more of a level of advocacy for myself, or setting up the right environment, or saying no, and staying connected to my body. That's where I felt most shame.
I don't want to, and I don't wish to invalidate that whatsoever, but what I will say to that is that when we are in a state of trauma, when we are feeling really disempowered and like nobody is seeing us or hearing us in our experience, that when that trauma brain is taken over, it shuts down the parts of the brain that are not necessary for survival. And one of those parts of our brain is the prefrontal cortex, the part that is responsible for rational thought, for language, for communicating, for advocating for ourselves, saying no, asking questions before we say yes to a procedure, right? So I think it's understandable that a lot of women feel like they let themselves or their baby down by not advocating for themselves more, or by not saying no to that procedure, or insisting on a second opinion or whatever. But actually, in that moment, that may not have been available to you at all. You may not have had the actual capacity to do that. And you talked about being disconnected from yourself and your body. That's a survival technique that the primal brain will put us into a dissociated state in order to be able to tolerate, survive through something that does feel untenable. It's a survival technique. So in hindsight, we can go, why didn't I this and that and the other thing? And there's actually a good reason why that wasn't available to us. And we should not have to be advocating for ourselves in labour. It's the last thing we should be doing. You should not have had to be protecting yourself from anything. That's you were supposed to be held in in a safe space to be able to just roar or move or do whatever you needed to do to follow your body's cues. So yes, but perhaps earlier on, if you'd had more of this knowledge, like it's always in hindsight, but if you'd had more of this knowledge, perhaps earlier on, you would have realized the significance of who you were inviting into your birth space and where you were choosing to give birth, which I'm sure we'll go into with you talking about your second birth, because you like I said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. So once you have this new information, I'm really interested to hear about what your next pregnancy and birth went like for you, and what different choices you made around all that. But first of all, can you just share with us how it was for you meeting your little girl and that under that birth experience, and how that might have impacted those early days, weeks, and months of motherhood for you?
Yeah. So the first, yeah, like I said, during the surgery and during the first moments of meeting my girl, there was quite a bit of dissociation from, the trauma, I think, or yeah, the bits of the experience that I was really not enjoying. So, yeah, I smiled during um, the surgery, looking into my partner's eyes, and the one thing I am grateful for and know that compared to other women in similar situations having a cesarean, I feel quite lucky that my baby was pretty much given to me straight away, and skin to skin, and it just felt surreal. It was sort of like I received my baby, and it was almost that in that moment I remembered what this whole journey had been about. It was just like, oh yeah, all of this was to receive my baby. I think I had just completely forgotten what I was even doing. It was just pain, pain, pain the whole way. Um, and so it was, yeah, it was very a beautiful moment to receive my baby, but then very foggy, because obviously lots of medications. I don't remember a lot of it. I remember seeing her, being told she was a girl. I remember hearing the high pitch of my voice and how that sounded quite familiar to other women meeting their babies for the first time. But it was just quite disembodied. Yeah. And then I remember being kind of wheeled out to this other room, and I think her name's Nora, my baby. She was with me or my partner the whole time. And we put off any kind of checks. They didn't do that for a couple, I don't know, a couple of days maybe, or at least 24 hours. And my partner went with them, and that was the only time that she wasn't in my arms. And she latched on fine and breastfed well for that first time. But then we went to like our ward, and then we were just kind of like left. And then I just had this baby, and I just had this feeling of like, I didn't know what to do. Like just very disconnected from myself as stepping into motherhood.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just remember we were in the hospital for a couple of days, and the nurses were coming in and out and kind of helping me to get the flow of breastfeeding, but it wasn't flowing that well, and just felt really like a failure at that moment, I think. And I remember like, yeah, different nurses coming in, and like every time it was a different nurse, and like they would come in with these bright blue latex gloves and be, helping me to breastfeed. And I just felt this kind of like repulsion in my body, like this is not how I want these precious moments to be, with bonding with my baby, and like, yeah, just like my boobs just being like kind of shoved into her mouth, and all these weird positions of putting her in. And I guess also like because of having this wound, I was very immobile, and that felt, yeah, really made it hard to find my flow.
How old was Nora when you were able to get out of that place and get home, and how did that feel for you?
Yeah, we got out of there as soon as we could. I think it was only a couple of days that we were in there. We left before they even recommended us leaving, because we were just yeah, keen to get out and get some fresh air and um, yeah, and just start to kind of uh, repair, I guess, and build um, yeah, build the start that we wished to create with our baby, in the way that we wish to do that. Yeah. Um, and yeah, the first like months, even years as a mother, I think were so influenced by the birth and this initiation into motherhood. There was I think so much second guessing of myself, and one thing that's just been really coming up for me lately since my second baby's been born, and um, is realizing the importance of emotions for healing. And that was something that I was able to sort of go through for my own healing, but I've only really just realized the importance of babies releasing emotions for their own healing. And something that I'm feeling quite passionate about at the moment is really holding space and lovingly listening to our babies crying when all the other needs are met, and really seeing that as a really valid need of theirs, because I came out of this birth feeling like I had failed my baby, and I really wanted her. I wanted to protect her and do everything I could to make it up to her. And in those moments, that my way of doing that was to soothe every little cry. Um, and it's yeah, only just now that I've found this desire and capacity in myself to really hold space for her big emotions that have that are there for her around her birth. And I just share this because I feel like coming out of a traumatic birth, it can often bring along these feelings of being a failure, and then having a baby who cries a lot because of potentially because of their traumatic entrance into the world can really add to that sense of being a failure as a mother, when when your baby is crying and you don't feel that you can do, soothe her. And so it's just something that I would wish for myself to have known back then, is that to lovingly hold her while she releases that trauma would be so important.
Yeah, this is a really interesting perspective, and I'm wondering if some people listening might be thinking, surely healing comes from, like settling your baby when they are crying. But this is something different you're talking about here. You said before that if you know all their needs are met, they don't need a nappy change, they don't they're not hungry, they're not cold, they're not too hot, they're not in pain, but rather it's them releasing emotions, they are having a cry, that's a healthy thing, and they can be held through that. But that's different to shushing a baby. That's different to putting a boob in their mouth to silence their cries.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been my experience coming through lately. Yeah.
Mm. And this was something you only really realized after the birth of your second baby?
Yeah. It's come from just I guess like this deep belief in that to heal things we have to feel them,
Mm,
and
mm,
um I've found that easier to kind of apply to myself. But when I see my babies crying, it's yeah, it has been harder to trust um that it's a very valid need of theirs, and that it's okay for them to cry, and that if they cry whilst feeling safe and loved, that it can, yeah, bring a really beautiful sense of healing and being
mm,
seen. And yeah, I guess it hasn't come so much through the birth of my second child, but just the timing has aligned with, as these things often do, just learning these life lessons at certain times. Yeah.
yes. Ah, beautiful, Hannah. So how did this all impact you when you got pregnant again? What did, was there any healing you did between Nora's birth and your next pregnancy? And if so, what and how? Like what helped you to, yeah, find some healing? Yeah.
Yeah. I think the large part of my healing happened um, between her birth and the start of the like preconception of my next baby.
Yeah.
Almost immediately after Nora was born, I had this deep feeling that that was not the way birth was supposed to be, and that I knew that it was not the fault of my body. And I really had this like experience that I had been let down by the support around me. And so I just really went on a deep dive and learnt about physiological birth, and learned and just listened to so many birth stories, and yeah, just started to understand so much about how birth works, and the things that interfere with birth that I experienced and that so many women are experiencing. And um and what that taught me, I guess, was um it really helped to lift a lot of the shame that I was feeling, because I started to see that it wasn't my fault, that I had stepped into this experience as the person that I was, knowing what I knew and with certain expectations. And that yeah, like you've said before, like with the way that I was supported, my body only did what would be expected, like to kind of shut down or not progress, all those sorts of things. So I started to really understand that, and started to yeah, not experience so much self-blame.
Mm.
And also seeing that helped me to also see the areas that I could take responsibility for. Like, it really helped me to see what was my responsibility in that, and how did I contribute to that happening. Um, and so yeah, that was really powerful. And what I loved um, was viewing this birth of my first daughter, Nora, as bringing these lessons as a gift, and that really brought a lot of meaning to her birth, um, for me, to like, yeah, to feel a lot of gratitude that this experience was helping me to learn so much about myself and to grow. Um, yeah.
Are there any particular resources, whether they be books or podcasts or people, or that stand out to you as being particularly helpful for that learning, that healing journey that you went on after Nora's birth?
Mm. So maybe I'll share in chronological order, because one of the first support that I had was from a friend who was a midwife. She's not practicing as a midwife at the moment, but she has a deep trust in women and an understanding of physiological birth, and this very genuine desire to support me. And she sent me one of your podcasts, actually, Carla, and it was about the importance of validating our emotions, and how so often we're kind of told to just be grateful because we've got a healthy baby, but how important it is to really feel, and to feel what we're feeling after our births, after our traumatic births, and how valid those feelings are. So that was the first sort of thing for me, was just really allowing those feelings to be felt. And I really feel that until these painful feelings are felt, they just stay trapped in the body, and they just stay very toxic in the body and in the mind. And it's very hard to move beyond them until we really give them that space and respect. Yeah. So that was the first thing, the first sort of, big part of that healing journey. And then I have a beautiful circle of women around me who gathered and listened to my story and loved me, and really validated what my experience was. So that felt very healing. And then I did the indie birth course. There was like a 30 moons or 10 moons, I can't remember how many moons, course.
Yeah.
And I don't remember too much from that, but and then the Freebirth Society, I listened to tons of their birth stories on the podcast, and I also did their ultimate guide to free birth, and just learnt about birth from a completely different perspective.
Awesome. So this was pre-conception, and so talk us through your second pregnancy, your plans for your next birth, and how that all unfolded for you.
Yeah. So this pregnancy and birth story is a lot shorter and simpler.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. I had no support from any registered midwives or healthcare professionals. So I had what some people call a wild pregnancy, of not doing any tests or ultrasound scans, or any tests. My intention was just really to trust my body, and that if something presented itself that I felt concerned about, that I could always seek help if I needed to, but just trusting that, for the most part, pregnancy and birth is safe, and that my body would let me know if I wanted to seek certain support. And so my pregnancy was really beautiful. My main kind of work of my pregnancy was just self-connection. So that meant just in every moment trying to attune to what my needs were, trying to attune to my body, and trusting that was the best thing that I could do to help myself. Yeah, so myself and a couple of friends started a birth circle to support women who wish to birth in their own power. And so there was a core group of us that were birthing women, and also a couple of women who are supporting women, like a craniosacral therapist, and just women who trust in birth, and we have these shared values for the group. Yeah, and so the circle has these shared values of supporting women to birth in their power and supporting physiological birth, and trusting in each woman's own inner knowing of what's best for her. Yeah.
Is it an in-person circle, Hannah, or do you meet online?
It's in person, and we meet monthly, and it's expanded now. So it's also including support for the woman moving into motherhood, so those first months of motherhood, and also we've got like 3 women joining us that are preconception and wanting to start calling in babies, but yeah, surrounding themselves with women that trust in birth. I know it lights me up too.
Yeah, if you're listening to the podcast rather than watching, I've got this look of like, so thrilled to be hearing this. And it just makes me think of something that I want to come back to that you said earlier about recognizing, or part of your healing with Nora's birth was acknowledging and seeing what lessons you could learn from it, but also acknowledging the parts that you could take responsibility for with any future births. And this sort of speaks to something that we talked about a lot in my last podcast interview that I did, which is, rather than being a victim of our circumstances and saying, like the fault was all outside of me, actually acknowledging the pieces that we do have control over, where we don't just entirely feel like a victim of, a shitty system and midwives who don't get the link between them, the need for you to feel safe in birth and that sort of thing. When we say, well, actually, yeah, I can't control those things, but these are the things I can have power and control over, then rather than being a helpless victim and continue to be in this disempowered state, we are then able to see a different path for us with a future birth. We're not just the victim of circumstance of the times and the culture and the societal values and that. No, I can actually, these are the things I do have control over, and actually the things that I am responsible for, because nobody is more responsible for this baby's well-being than I am. And I know how impactful birth is. I know how impactful having those needless scans in pregnancy can be, or giving away my power to the quote unquote authority figures, how detrimental that can be. So yeah, I'm taking the power back. And I love this, that you found a sisterhood of like-minded women to support each other in this crucial element of mothering, of family living, of life.
Yeah, so empowering. The potential of using these experiences to grow and to step into our power as women. And birth, it just shows you yourself, like in the most the most vivid way. Can be quite confronting, but very powerful opportunities there to grow and step into our power as women. And what's particularly powerful about having a circle around you of women who trust in birth is just rewriting the stories around birth, because that was something after Nora's birth that I felt so disappointed about, was that I really didn't want her birth to be used as another example of why birth is unsafe, because I really didn't feel that that it was that. I didn't feel that it was an example of birth not working. And I really didn't want that to contribute to that story. So I feel like it's so important and so powerful to surround yourself with other women who trust in birth, and to to start to rewrite the story around birth.
Yeah. Can I ask you to share with us, you said that the biggest part, the most important part of your like preparation was you called it self something. What was it? Was it self connection? It may have been self connection. What did
Connection.
that look like at a practical level for you? What did practicing self connection, tuning in, like for somebody listening going, okay, I need to do more of this self connection, what does that look like? How do I do that? What does that mean? Can you give a little bit of insight?
Yeah, so I just made it really simple and just made it a practice of regularly tuning in and just seeing, like, how am I feeling and what do I feel like I need. And if I felt like I needed rest, then I would take responsibility for getting rest. And if I felt like I needed movement, then I would take responsibility for that. And yeah, letting go of any shoulds, trying to be aware as much as possible of any kind of doing things to please somebody else, and just trying to connect into my own inner world, and then taking responsibility for those needs. And and I see pregnancy as like a really good time to practice the things that we want to bring into our births. So for me, I really wanted to, like, self-responsibility was a big one. So any time that presented in my life to either take responsibility or to outsource, I would always try to see it as an opportunity to connect in with myself and my intuition, and just to kind of like play with that.
So yeah, presumably your vision was for to free birth then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah Talk us through that.
Yeah, so my vision was just to let birth unfold, and to not call into my space anyone who might interfere with that. I did call upon a friend, or two friends, to kind of be on standby, that if I might like them to come and help support, be with my daughter or rub my back, or whatever it may be, that to have people on standby. So other than that, I just kept it very simple. I didn't even plan to have a water birth, like, even though that might have been nice. I just wanted to have as few things to fuss about and think about, and just to just to let it unfold simply and without too much too much kind of like expectations, I guess. And so, are you ready for me to just move into that birth story?
Yeah. Sure am. I'm excited.
So it was about 2 a.m. I think in the morning. I had been having sort of sensations for about a week, maybe, like often coming in the night, and sometimes they would get a little bit intense, but then they would just go away. And so on the night that I did go into labor, I can't actually remember how many weeks I thought I was, but I must have been about 41 or 41 and a half weeks. So I was quite excited and quite ready. And so the sensation started, and there was just this openness in me for this to be the night. And yeah, so it was about 2 a.m. in the morning, and pretty much the sensations came, and they came on hard and fast, and I feel like I went straight back to the point in Nora's birth where I went into that point of agony. Perhaps not quite as intense, but very, very intense. And there was no slow build up. I just went straight into this very intense, painful sensation. And I pretty much stayed there the whole birth in that level of intensity. Like, I don't really feel like I could feel that there were contractions, but it kind of just felt like one long contraction. And the way I perceived that, or perceive it now, and also perceived it in the moment, was that I was going back to all of those sort of feelings from Nora's birth, and I just had to work through them. And it was just my body contracted in this state of fear that I just had to work through. And yeah, and it was so healing, to have that opportunity to do that. And there was lots of tremors, and actually my body is even tremoring now throughout the video of sharing these stories of just releasing that trauma. And so 2 a.m. in the morning, started straight away into these very strong sensations, and I was trying to wake up my partner, and he was fast asleep, so I ended up throwing a pillow at him to wake him up. And he woke up, and then he could see that it was very intense. So he asked whether I would like him to call my friend, and it was very clear yes for me. So he called her, and she's a very dear friend. She's free-birthed 2 of her 3 children, and sat with me in circle throughout my whole pregnancy. And so she arrived, and she just walked in with this beautiful warm energy and put her hands on my shoulders and gave me a kiss on the cheek, and just told me I was doing so well. And I don't think I even looked at her. I think I just said, "This is so painful." And she said, "I know." And then that was, and then the birth, from the first sort of contraction until my baby was born was about 6 hours. And during that time, I just stayed in our little cabin, and my partner and my friend just took turns at being with me and being with my daughter, coming in and out. And I just had to just work through these work through that contracted state. And and just I didn't at any point feel any concern or any fear that anything was wrong, or that that anything was going to go wrong. But there was just this element of disbelief that I couldn't quite imagine that a baby was going to come out of me. It was like is this really going to happen? And I kept looking down at my belly and just seeing this big bump, and it looked like it was so high up, and it was just kind of, yeah, it really bewildered me, the idea that that was going to move through me. But I just stayed with it, and my body really just did it. It did everything that it needed to do. At some point, my partner and my friend were both out of the room, and there was this sort of like opening to step even further into my power, it felt. And I stood up and I started talking to my baby, and I started really like owning it, and believing in it, I think, was sort of the change that felt in that moment. And and then and so I started saying to my baby, yeah, come on baby, you're so welcome, like we can't wait to meet you. And then my partner came in, and we were both sort of chanting, come on baby, come on baby. And I was standing and holding this in the middle of my cabin. We've got this it's kind of like a tree, which is like a pole on the end of the kitchen bench. Yeah, so I was holding onto this, and we're both chanting, come on, baby. And then my waters just burst everywhere. And it was just such a beautiful moment of validation, like that, that I could do it and that it was happening. And yeah, and then from then, like not long after that, my body just started pushing. Yeah, kind of like, yeah, those sort of involuntary pushes, like it was just pushing my baby out. And I was just roaring and couldn't, yeah, just in total amazement. And I had asked my partner to catch the baby. So at some point, my friend was in the room with me, and she's birthed 3 babies, so she could kind of feel that birth was getting closer. And she brought my partner and my daughter into the room, and they were sitting on the bed watching. And yeah, and then my body just birthed the head of my baby. And then I, like, on a spiritual level, just went somewhere. And then I heard a woman's voice saying, "You're safe to release your baby's body." And it just brought me back into my body. I had thought that they were the voice of my friend, but after talking to her later, she said that she hadn't said a word during that time. And yeah, and so I heard these words, and it brought me just, yeah, like zoom back into my body, and I just released the body of my baby into my partner's hands. And I just dropped onto my knees in like complete shock and disbelief. And yeah, I was just in complete shock. Mm.
Wow. I need you back on the screen because I need to be able to see your face now. Well, there you are. Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And so sometimes there is this transition point, not just for the baby, where the baby is, going from the womb and into the world and making that transition, but also for the mum where they need a bit of time to come into the moment, and to meet their baby. Was that your experience, or were you like, straight there, straight connected, scooping up your baby, and yeah.
Yeah, I was in complete shock. Like, my baby transitioned very quickly, which was, yeah, there was no moments of uncertainty or fear or doubt there. And but yeah, like it was bloody. So there was a bit of blood loss and just the shock of such intense experience of working through so much fear and trauma in my body and releasing all of that. Yeah, so my partner gave me my baby, and my partner and my friend got me sitting, kind of sitting lying down in my bed, and I was holding my baby. But yeah, it took me really a long time. I was sort of shaking, just in shock. It took me a long time to really land and connect. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
And how did you feel when you did, when you'd landed and connected? How did you feel about yourself, and how did you feel in that moment? Or was it a real mix?
Yeah, it's interesting because I would have imagined, and I think most people that I've shared, like who knew my story and then learnt that, I had this very straightforward birth at home on our own, would have imagined it to be like this very ecstatic moment and like a very intensely positively emotional moment, and it was very positive, but it was this very kind of like slow grounded unfolding of redemption. I think that like it took quite a while for the shock to wear off, and yeah, and even now I feel it's still kind of unfolding like this. Yeah, it's felt so slow and steady, but just so grounded, I think is kind of like the word for it. So the first sort of few days, it was still kind of surreal, was the feeling. And I couldn't quite like connect with the reality of what had just happened. It is something that like just started to live through me, and just, yeah, more in the way that I mother and how I feel as a mother and as a woman. Yeah.
I imagine it will be really validating for some listeners to hear you speak into this. Yeah, there's always surprises in birth. Like, it is one of the gifts of birth, is that you don't know how it's going to unravel. You don't know when it's going to start, how it's going to start, how intense it's going to be, how long it's going to go on for. You don't know any of that until afterwards. And it's one of the gifts of birth, is that we just have to sink into trust and surrender, because it is unpredictable. It's the way it's meant to be, and that prepares us, I believe, for in part for the path of the mother, which is accepting the things we can't control with this little being that we are responsible for, and trusting our the intuitive sense around what their needs are and that sort of thing. They don't come with a manual that says, when this happens, this is what you're to do, and this is, so you have to lean into trust and yeah. so that how you felt when you had come out the other side of this and met your baby for the first time might have been quite different to what perhaps you had anticipated it might look and feel like, and there was beauty in that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how different or not was the early weeks and months of parenting your second born?
Very, very different. Yeah, just so much more simple, so much less like, yeah, just less distracted by the trauma and the feelings from having what was for me a very traumatic birth, and having to kind of like split myself between pushing down those feelings at certain times to be able to just show up as a mother in the early days, and then yeah, so just, I guess, a lot of simplicity and more ease of just being able to just be how I was, and yeah, with quite, yeah, not too many expectations of myself. Yeah. It's been a big adjustment having two children. Like, being with the baby feels so easy. But yeah, the having two now is just like a next level of surrendering into motherhood. But it's so amazing. I have so much love for both of these girls, and seeing the connection between them, and yeah, and just feeling this expansion of myself into being a mother, and really finding my own inner authority with that, because it is something that I've felt a lot of kind of doubt and uncertainty of how I wish to be as a mother, and I feel a lot more clarity at the moment, and I can only imagine that that is so much related to this experience, this positive birth experience, and yeah, and how impactful our births can be on, yeah, our next steps forward into, yeah, a motherhood.
Yeah. Hannah, what's the age gap between your girls?
3 years and 3 days.
So how old is your little one then?
She is nearly 6 months.
Okay, all right. Because I was thinking that you said Nora was 3, so I was like, oh, how newborn is so Nora she was present when her sibling was being born, and how was she in that moment? Did she talk about the birth at all, or was it just so normal? Like, yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah, I think during the labor, during the birthing experience, when I was making lots of sounds, it was a bit maybe overwhelming, and she preferred my partner and my friend. But I do remember one moment of just being like in my own world, and my own world of pain at that moment, my experience of pain, and looking up and seeing her, and it just made everything so much less painful, and just so gave me this moment of inspiration, and reminded me of why, like, yeah, even more than wanting it for myself in that moment, was just wanting it for her, and just so deeply wanting her to see birth, and yeah, and so she was there on the bed, just very quietly watching, as her baby sister was born. And yeah, she talked about it for like a little bit afterwards. And yeah, it just hasn't been too big of a deal for her, really. She's got a very close bond. She loves her sister so much.
Mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm. Oh, this has been the
Mm,
most amazing share,
mm.
on many fronts, and such a gift, to be sharing this on this forum. Yeah. So cool that you were encouraged to listen to a podcast episode, and that was at the beginning of your own sort of healing journey. And now here you are sharing a story that I'm sure will offer healing and inspiration and hope for other listeners who are on their own paths. And so thank you so much for
Mm.
this gift. Yeah, how beautiful. And
Mm.
if you are, I don't know if this is something that you're open to sharing or not, but if you are still running, the group is still running these circles where you meet once a month, then let us know on the podcast if it's appropriate to do so, how people can, where you are, firstly, because I haven't asked that yet, and I don't actually know where you're based, since they're in person, and how people can get in touch if they're interested in potentially joining the circle.
Yeah, sure. Would you like me to speak that now?
If you're happy to, yeah,
Yes.
I'm not sure, yeah, whether
No, I'm
I
very
was putting you on the spot or not, but if you're happy to, yes, please.
Mhm. Yeah. So I'm based up in the far north of New Zealand. So yeah, between sort of Kaitaia and Doubtless Bay. And I guess, yeah, I'm on Instagram, Wildflower NZ. I actually can't remember if there's any full stops or underscores or anything,
I
but
will I will put the link in the show notes so people
cool.
can, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, yeah, getting in touch with me somehow, and then I can
Okay,
I can, yeah, add any other contact details there for you afterwards.
amazing.
Yeah, and oh, would so welcome any woman who are just wanting even just a space to connect in with themselves, like without any um expectations from the group of what that has to look like, of what their choices have to look like, but just having a space to process and to connect with their own desires and their own wisdom, and being around women who support birth. Um, yeah, and just to follow on from um, what you said before, Carla, I feel so much gratitude to be able to share my story, because after the birth of Nora, I just felt such a deep grief about how birth is in our culture, and the stories around birth, and and what women have to navigate in the birthing space. So yeah, I'm very, very grateful to be able to share a positive story.
Mm.
And,
Mm.
mm,
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Thank you.
mm,
um, hmm.